The stars above the Galactic Council's capital world burned like cold silver fire. Every race in the known galaxy had gathered there, from the glowing Sarathi to the towering Bracken warriors. At the center of it all stood the proud Valari Empire, known for its grace, power, and long history of conquest. But this day was not one of triumph for them. It was a day of humiliation. The Valari had lost their war against the humans, a young, small species from a blue world called Earth. No one in the galaxy had expected humans to survive the war, let alone win. Yet here they stood side by side with the most ancient empires, their ships orbiting above like silent wolves among lions. And because of that victory, the Valari Princess Lysera now stood before the council, her silver eyes cold as ice. She was known across the stars for her beauty, long white hair that shimmered like moonlight, and skin faintly glowing with a soft blue hue. But there was no peace in her expression, only anger and the sharp edge of wounded pride. Across from her stood Commander Ethan Ward, a tall human with dark brown hair, simple uniform, and calm eyes that seemed to hold storms within them. He didn't wear medals or bright ornaments. He didn't need to. Every leader in that room knew his name, the man who led the counterattack at Orion's belt and forced the Valari to surrender. Now, those same two enemies were being joined together in marriage. The council chamber buzzed with whispers. Some called it justice. Others called it madness. A golden-robed counselor rose from his seat and spoke. Princess Lysera of the Valari Dominion, Commander Ethan Ward of the Human Alliance. To ensure peace between your peoples, this union shall serve as a symbol, a bridge between two civilizations once at war. Lysera's voice was sharp, her tone dripping with disbelief. A symbol? You demand that I marry a soldier of the species that destroyed my fleets? This is not peace. It is punishment. Ethan's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. Peace is not built on pride, Your Highness. It's built on sacrifice. For a moment, their eyes met, hers full of fury, his filled with quiet strength. Neither looked away. When the ceremony began, Lysera stood stiff and silent. The words of alliance and peace echoed through the grand hall. But to her they felt hollow. She barely heard them. In her heart she swore she would never forgive the humans for what they had taken. Her freedom, her empire's honor, and now her own will. Ethan didn't try to touch her or speak to her during the ceremony. When the vows were over, he simply bowed his head. I will do my duty, he said softly. That night, after the lights of the council hall dimmed, Lysera was escorted to the human starship Endurance. The ship would take her to Earth, her new home. She stood at the docking bay watching the metal giant before her. Its dark hull reflected the starlight like a blade. She whispered to herself, They think they can chain me to this world of iron. Inside the ship, Ethan waited for her with a respectful distance. His voice was steady. Welcome aboard, Princess. You'll have full quarters and privacy. No one will disturb you. She turned to him sharply. You expect me to thank you for my prison? He looked at her for a long second. No. I expect you to see that it doesn't have to be one. Then he turned and left her alone. As the Endurance traveled through hyperspace, Lysera kept to herself. She refused to speak to the crew or eat human food. The humans, to her surprise, did not mock her or treat her cruelly. They worked quietly, showing her respect, though she could feel their curiosity. She often stood by the observation window, looking out at the glowing stars that streaked past. Back home, she had been surrounded by servants, courtiers, and admirers. Here there was only silence, and that strange human who treated her not as a prize but as a person. One day a soft knock came at her door. Ethan's voice was on the other side. Princess will be arriving on Earth soon. The council will want a public appearance when we land. I will not play a puppet in your celebrations, she said coldly. Ethan sighed. Neither will I. But people need to believe this peace is real. If we both stand there together, well, maybe they'll stop hating. Lysera turned away. You speak as if hatred can simply disappear. He gave a faint smile. It can't, but maybe it can fade if someone starts first. For a moment, she didn't answer. There was something disarming about his tone. Not arrogant, not commanding, just calm, patient. The same patience that had broken the Valari war machine piece by piece. When the Endurance reached Earth, Lysera was not ready for what she saw. The planet looked alive. Green continents, blue oceans, bright cities glowing in the night. She had expected it to be dull, mechanical, filled with smoke and war machines. Instead, it was beautiful, raw, and full of motion. Crowds filled the landing area. Humans cheered and waved as she stepped out beside Ethan. The air was cool, carrying the scent of rain. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Ethan stood beside her, calm and steady, while Lysera kept her chin high, refusing to show fear or weakness. When one human child broke through the crowd and ran toward her, the guards moved to stop him, but Lysera raised a hand. The boy simply held out a small flower, a blue blossom that matched the glow of her skin. She took it silently. For the first time since the war ended, she didn't know what to say. Ethan leaned slightly toward her and said softly, "They don't see a prisoner. They see hope." She looked at him, unsure if he was mocking her or not, but his expression was sincere. Later that evening, inside the human capital's guest palace, Lysera stood on a high balcony. The night sky above Earth was full of moving lights, satellites, ships, and stars. She could hear faint music coming from the streets below. Humans were celebrating peace. Her mind, however, was not at peace. She remembered her father's anger, her people's cries of betrayal, and the faces of soldiers who had fallen. To her, humans were once enemies who destroyed all she loved. Now she was bound to one of them by law. She clenched the small blue flower in her hand until its petals crumbled. Behind her, she heard the quiet footsteps of Ethan entering. He kept a respectful distance. "Tomorrow there will be a reception. You don't have to speak if you don't want to. Just standing there will be enough." "Enough for you?" she asked bitterly. "Enough for peace," he said simply. She turned her gaze to the stars. "You humans fight for peace as if it's another war." He gave a faint laugh. "Maybe it is, but it's one worth fighting for." For a brief moment, she looked at him differently, not as an enemy, not as a captor, but as someone who carried a quiet strength she could not understand. When he left, she stood alone again, the cool night wind brushing against her hair. "This is not peace," she whispered to the stars. "This is a cage." But somewhere deep inside her heart, though she refused to admit it, a small voice asked, "What if he is right? What if peace is something you must build, even inside a cage?" As the city lights shimmered far below and the human world stretched out before her, the alien princess realized her story with the humans was only beginning. And far beyond the horizon, unseen by both of them, the stars burned quietly, watching, waiting to see what would become of the union between the proud Valari princess and the patient human commander. The first morning on Earth was strange for Princess Lysera. The air smelled different, fresh, mixed with the scent of rain and growing trees. Sunlight passed through the window of her guest chamber, warm and golden, unlike the pale blue glow of her homeworld's twin suns. For a moment she stood still, feeling that warmth on her skin. It was pleasant. Then she remembered where she was, on a world of humans, as their symbol of peace. Her pride reminded her not to forget. When the door opened, Commander Ethan Ward stepped inside. He was dressed in the same simple uniform, calm as always. He bowed slightly and said, "Good morning, Princess. The Council has arranged a tour of the capital. It will help you understand Earth better." Lysera crossed her arms. "I already understand enough. Humans are conquerors hiding behind polite words." Ethan didn't argue. He only replied, "Then maybe seeing our world will show you what we truly are." After a short silence, she finally nodded. "Very well, Commander, but only because I wish to see what kind of planet believes it has won peace through marriage." They left the palace in a hover car that moved silently through the city. Lysera watched through the window as Earth's capital, New Geneva, spread out below her. Tall towers of glass and steel rose above green parks. Skyways filled with air vehicles looped through them like ribbons. People walked along the streets, laughing, trading, living. Lysera's eyes narrowed. "Your world looks alive, almost too alive." Ethan smiled slightly. "That's humanity. We don't stay still for long." She saw children chasing robotic pets, merchants calling out in open-air markets, and music drifting through the air. It was noisy, colorful, and full of emotion, nothing like the cold perfection of Valari cities where everything was quiet and controlled. "Do all humans live like this?" she asked. "Not all," Ethan replied, "but most try to find joy where they can. We learned that from struggle." Our world wasn't always peaceful. Lysra thought of her people, how the Volari saw humans as impulsive and wild. Maybe they were right, but she could also see a kind of beauty in their chaos. Their first stop was a human cultural museum. It was full of strange artifacts, ancient armor, musical instruments, and paintings that showed moments of history. One painting caught Lysra's eye. It showed humans standing in front of a destroyed city, holding hands as light broke through the clouds. She asked softly, "What happened here?" Ethan looked at the plaque. That was after the Third Global War. Billions died. But instead of ending humanity, it united us. We decided no more wars on our own soil. That was the start of the United Earth Alliance. Lysra turned her gaze to him. "You built peace out of ashes," he nodded. "We had no choice. Survival made us change." She said nothing more, but for the first time she looked at humans not as conquerors but as survivors. Later that day they visited a science center. Human engineers showed her new fusion drives, planetary shields, and agricultural systems that fed billions. Lysra was surprised. "These systems," she said, "they are efficient but simple. You use limited materials but achieve high results." "How?" Ethan smiled faintly. "We don't have the resources your empire had, so we make things work with what we have. Adaptation, that's humanity's strength." Lysra touched the glowing model of a human colony. "You built all this after barely escaping extinction. You are not as simple as I thought." "Neither are you," Ethan replied quietly. Their eyes met for a second, but Lysra quickly looked away. That evening, they returned to the palace. Lysra sat alone on the balcony, staring at the sunset. The sky burned orange and pink, a sight unlike any she had seen before. Humans gathered below in the streets, lighting lanterns and singing songs of peace. Their voices carried upward like wind through the stars. Ethan approached quietly, holding 2 cups of warm tea. "It's a local tradition," he said, offering one. "We drink this while watching the sunset." Lysra hesitated, then accepted it. The taste was strange, bitter yet soothing. She asked, "Do you truly believe peace will last? Between our species?" He took a slow sip before answering. "I hope so. But peace is like this sunset. Beautiful but fragile. You have to protect it every day." She stared at the fading light. "And what if it breaks again?" "Then we rebuild it," he said simply. Something about his words stayed in her mind long after he left. A week later, Lysra was invited to a human research station on the coast. The scientists there wanted to learn from her people's advanced knowledge of energy crystals. At first, she refused. "You want my empire's secrets?" Ethan replied, "No, we want understanding. You could teach them, and maybe they could teach you something too." Finally, she agreed, and out of curiosity more than trust. When she arrived, the scientists greeted her warmly, not with fear or arrogance. They listened to her, asked thoughtful questions, and showed her their experiments with respect. Lysra found herself explaining Volari energy harmonics to them, simplifying complex equations. They listened like students before a teacher. One young scientist said, "Princess, your technology could help us cure energy shortages on colonies." Lysra paused. "You would use it to help others, not to build weapons?" "Of course," the woman said with a smile. "We have enough weapons already." That simple reply struck Lysra deeply. When she left the lab that evening, she stood near the ocean, watching waves crash under the moonlight. Ethan joined her quietly. "You taught them something today," he said. She looked at him. "And they taught me something too. Maybe humans and Volari are not so different," he nodded. "We both want to survive. We just have different ways of showing it." For the first time, Lysra smiled faintly. "You speak wisely for a soldier." Ethan chuckled softly. "War teaches wisdom, Princess." One night a sudden storm struck the coast. Lightning lit up the sky, and power across the palace went out. Alone in the darkness, Lysra walked through the hall, her glowing skin faintly lighting her way. She found Ethan trying to repair a generator by hand. Rain poured outside the windows. "Commander, what are you doing?" she asked. "Keeping the systems from flooding," he replied, voice steady. "These storms come fast here." Without hesitation, Lysra knelt beside him. "I can help." Together they worked, her knowledge of energy conduits mixing with his engineering skill. When the lights finally came back on, both were drenched but laughing quietly. "You're not what I expected," she said softly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect?" A cold, proud warrior, he smiled. I could say the same about you. For the first time since their marriage, the silence between them felt calm, not cold. Days turned into weeks. Lysera's anger began to fade, replaced by curiosity, and something deeper she didn't yet understand. She walked among humans freely now, visiting schools, gardens, and art galleries. Everywhere she went, people greeted her with warmth. Once a small girl ran up and handed her a handmade bracelet. "You're the space princess," the girl said proudly. Lysera bent down and smiled gently. "I am Lysera, and you are very brave." Ethan watched from a distance, seeing how easily the people began to love her. That evening, as they watched the city lights together, he said quietly, "They believe in you, princess." Lysera looked at him, the golden lights reflecting in her silver eyes. "Then I must not fail them, or you." For the first time, she felt the weight of her duty not as punishment, but as purpose. That night, as she stood alone on the balcony again, she whispered to herself, "Maybe this world is not a cage. Maybe it's a test, and I'm learning to breathe again." And far away in the sky, stars shone over the blue planet, watching a princess from the stars begin to understand humanity, and a human commander quietly earning her trust one day at a time. The galaxy had grown quiet since the treaty between humans and the Valari Dominion. For months, peace held. Trade routes opened, ambassadors smiled for cameras, and news broadcasts spoke of a new era of unity. But peace is never simple. Somewhere beyond the mapped borders in the dark edges of space, another power watched and waited. The Draxan Syndicate, a brutal faction that had once served as pirates and mercenaries during the Valari-Human War, was gathering strength again. They had no loyalty to anyone. They thrived on chaos and profit, and now they saw opportunity. When humans and Valari turned to peace, the Draxans saw weakness. On Earth, Princess Lysera had begun to adapt to her new life. Months had passed since her arrival. She now spoke some human languages, attended peace meetings, and even gave short public speeches about unity. Her presence had become a symbol. Children waved banners with her name. The people loved her calm grace and soft voice. She had changed more than anyone expected, even herself. But she still carried a small ache in her heart, a quiet homesickness. One evening, while she worked in her study, a soft knock came at the door. Commander Ethan Ward entered holding a datapad. "Bad news, Princess," he said, his tone serious. "A colony on the border, a new horizon, where it was attacked last night." Lysera looked up sharply. "By whom?" "We're not sure. But the survivors say the attackers used Valari weapons, stolen ones." Her eyes widened. "That cannot be. My people would never break the treaty." "I know," Ethan said quietly. "That's why we think someone wants to make it look that way." He placed the datapad on the table. On it was a holovid. Burning cities, civilian ships destroyed, and terrified refugees. It looked like war all over again. Lysera's heart sank. "The Council will blame both of us." "They already are," Ethan said grimly. "The Draxans are trying to pull us into another fight." The next day, an emergency session of the Galactic Council was called. Representatives from dozens of species filled the Great Hall, their voices echoing with anger and fear. "The humans have violated the peace," shouted a Brackon delegate. "Impossible," argued a human ambassador. "Those weapons were not ours." Lysera sat beside Ethan, her expression calm but her mind racing. Finally, a counselor turned toward her. "Princess Lysera, as the voice of the Valari, do you stand with your husband's people or your own?" The room went silent. Lysera stood slowly. Every gaze in the chamber turned toward her, some hopeful, some full of suspicion. "I stand with truth," she said clearly. "And the truth is that humans did not attack. The Draxan Syndicate seeks to divide us. I know their methods. They use stolen technology to provoke war." Her voice was firm, royal, and steady. "If we fall for their lies, we destroy everything we've built." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then quiet murmurs spread across the room. The counselor nodded slowly. "Then we will investigate. But if you are wrong, Princess, both your names will carry the blame." Lysera met his gaze without fear. "Then let the truth judge us." Ethan said nothing, but his eyes showed silent respect. A week later, Lysera and Ethan traveled together to the border colony that had been attacked. The journey through hyperspace was tense. Neither slept much. When the ship dropped out of warp, the sight took their breath away. New Horizon was a wasteland. Floating debris drifted across orbit, the remains of cities burning below. Rescue ships moved like tiny fireflies across the night side of the planet. Lysera whispered, "So much destruction. For what?" Ethan replied softly, "For profit, power, and hate." They landed near the main command post. Soldiers saluted Ethan as he stepped out, and scientists bowed respectfully to Lysera. Together they walked through the ruins. Lysera knelt beside a collapsed building, touching the cold metal. Her fingers glowed faintly as her Valari senses read the energy traces. "This was not human fire," she said after a moment. "These signatures?" "They are Draxan. Modified Valari weapons," Ethan nodded. "Then we can prove it." That night, inside a temporary base, they worked together. Ethan analyzing battle footage, Lysera decoding energy fragments. Slowly, the evidence formed a picture. The Draxan Syndicate had used stolen Valari tech to frame humans. As they studied the data, a sudden alarm blared through the camp. "Enemy ships inbound," shouted a voice over the comms. "Multiple Draxan signatures." Lysera and Ethan exchanged a glance. There was no time to escape. "Get the civilians underground," Ethan ordered. "We'll hold them here." Outside, the night sky filled with fire. Draxan fighters descended, raining plasma bolts. The ground shook as explosions lit up the ruins. Ethan ran to the barricades, rifle in hand, shouting orders. Lysera stood beside him, activating her Valari shield device. A shimmering barrier spread across the line of soldiers, deflecting enemy fire. Humans and Valari engineers worked side by side under her command. The battle was fierce but coordinated. Ethan moved with calm precision, leading small units to strike back. Lysera provided energy readings, predicting enemy patterns. For hours, they fought like that, two leaders from once enemy races, defending the same ground. When the last Draxan fighter finally fell, silence returned. Smoke rose over the colony. Ethan lowered his weapon, breathing hard. "We did it," he said softly. Lysera looked at him. "No, Commander. They did it." She gestured to the humans and Valari soldiers standing together, exhausted but alive. Together. The next morning, they gathered all the evidence, weapon fragments, data logs, captured Draxan tech. When they returned to the Galactic Council, they presented it all. Lysera stood in the center of the hall once again. "These are the hands that tried to break peace," she said, pointing to the hologram of Draxan ships. But they failed. Humans and Valari stood side by side and stopped them. Ethan added, "If peace can survive the fires of battle, then maybe it deserves to last." The council reviewed the data in silence. After what felt like hours, the head counselor rose. "We accept your proof. The Draxan Syndicate is responsible. Earth and Valari Dominion are cleared of blame." A wave of relief swept through the hall. For the first time, the room erupted in applause. But Lysera wasn't thinking of victory. She was thinking of the soldiers who had fought together, and of the human commander who had stood beside her without hesitation. That night, back on Earth, she visited the city memorial where the names of fallen soldiers were being engraved. She stood quietly, watching Ethan speak to the families. When he approached her afterward, she said softly, "You risked your life again, Commander." "Why?" He looked at her, tired but honest. "Because peace is worth bleeding for." Her heart felt strange, heavy and warm at the same time. Later, they walked together along the palace garden under the stars. Lysera said, "When I was told to marry you, I felt I was being punished. I thought you would be proud, cruel, or arrogant. But you are none of those things." Ethan smiled faintly. "And what do you think now?" She hesitated. "Now, I think perhaps this was never punishment. Maybe it was a test. For both of us," he nodded. "Then maybe we passed." For a long moment, they stood in silence, listening to the soft hum of the city. Lysera turned her gaze to the sky. "My people will hear what happened today. They will see that humans can protect, not just destroy. And mine will see that Valari can fight for peace, not just power," Ethan said. She smiled gently. "Perhaps this is how real peace begins, not with treaties, but with trust." As they walked back toward the palace lights, a message came from the council. A joint mission was being planned to hunt down the remaining Draxan fleets. Lysera looked at Ethan. "Then our work is not finished." He grinned slightly. Peace never is, and as they stood there, under the glowing stars of Earth's sky, the alien princess and the human commander knew the galaxy was changing again, not through war, but through the courage to stand together. The city of Voron was quiet that night. The twin moons hung low over the shining towers, and the warm winds carried soft music from distant streets. Inside the royal garden, Princess Lyra walked slowly among glowing flowers, her hands brushing over their light petals. Her mind was full of thoughts, heavy yet uncertain. It had been weeks since she had been forced to marry the human named Ethan. At first she had hated him. She had seen him as a symbol of humiliation, a punishment from the Galactic Council that had taken her pride away. But things were not as she once believed. Every time she looked at him now, she saw not weakness but quiet strength. Ethan had worked hard to rebuild the damaged farm at the edge of the city. He repaired machines with skill, helped the poor villagers who came to him for aid, and never once raised his voice. He had patience even when others mocked him for being human. Lyra had watched him in secret many times. His kindness confused her. He was supposed to be her captor, yet she felt no chains. That evening she found herself walking toward the old farm again. The lights inside were still on and faint music played from a small speaker. She saw Ethan sitting near a table, fixing a broken mechanical bird one of the village children had brought. His hands moved carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. "You are still awake," she said softly from the doorway. Ethan looked up and smiled. "Couldn't sleep. This little one had a broken wing. I promised her it would fly again." Lyra stepped closer, her eyes on the small metal bird. "You fix even toys for children?" He shrugged lightly. "Sometimes small things matter more than big ones." The girl cried all day when it stopped flying. There was something in his tone, gentle, honest. It made her chest feel strange. She watched as he repaired the last wire and pressed a button. The bird came alive, flapping its small metal wings before taking off around the room in graceful circles. Lyra laughed softly, a sound she hadn't made in a long time. "You did it," Ethan grinned. "A promise is a promise." The bird landed on Lyra's shoulder, chirping a soft tone. She touched it lightly, her eyes reflecting the silver light. For a moment, the walls of pride and anger she had built around her heart began to fall. She sat opposite him. "Why do you do all this?" she asked. "You were sent here as punishment, just like I was." He nodded. "Yes, maybe. But punishment can also be a chance. I can't control how others see me, but I can control what I do." Lyra was silent. His words were simple but full of meaning. She had spent her life surrounded by nobles who spoke in circles, full of pride and empty of kindness. Ethan spoke straight, and it touched something deep inside her. They sat together in silence for a while. The moonlight came through the windows and the little mechanical bird perched between them. Lyra finally said, "When I was forced into this marriage, I thought my life was over. I thought it was the end of my honor." Ethan looked at her, his eyes soft. "And now?" She hesitated, looking down. "Now, I am not sure. You confuse me, human." He smiled gently. "That makes two of us, princess." The next morning, Lyra joined him in the village for the first time. The people were surprised to see her, the proud princess who once looked down upon them. Together, she and Ethan worked to repair the old water pumps that had broken. Her fine robes got covered in dust, but she didn't care. The villagers stared in disbelief as she kneeled beside Ethan, handing him tools, learning how things worked. "Press that switch," Ethan said. "Yes, right there, good." The machine roared to life, spraying clean water into the air. The children cheered. Lyra smiled, truly smiled, as the villagers thanked them both. That evening, as they walked back, Lyra said, "I never knew humans could do such things with their hands." Ethan chuckled. "We had to. Our world was not kind. If something broke, you fixed it, or it stayed broken forever." Lyra thought about that. "Maybe your people are stronger than we thought." He looked at her. "Maybe your people are kinder than you think." They reached the farm just as the stars began to shine. Lyra stopped and looked up at the night sky. "Do you ever miss your home?" "Every day," Ethan said softly. "But I've learned something here. Home is not just where you are born. Sometimes it's where someone needs you." His words stayed with her long after he went inside. Over the next few days, they worked side by side more often. Lyra found herself laughing more, speaking freely, even defending him when others insulted him. The guards who once looked at Ethan with disdain now treated him with a hint of respect. But not everyone was pleased. The royal advisor, Lord Tareth, watched them from afar with cold eyes. He saw the growing bond between the human and the princess as a threat. The council will not like this, he whispered to himself. The punishment was meant to humble her, not make her care for him. That night, Tareth sent a secret message to the Galactic Council. Back at the farm, Lyra couldn't sleep. She walked out to the field and saw Ethan sitting by the glowing river. She joined him quietly. The air smelled of night flowers. "Do you ever wonder?" she said softly. "If fate can be changed?" Ethan looked at her, puzzled. "Why do you ask?" "Because I was taught that everything is decided. Who we marry, what we become, even how we die. But since you came, I feel like maybe we can choose differently." Ethan smiled gently. "I don't know about fate, Princess, but I believe in choices. Every day we choose who we are." Lyra looked at him for a long time. The reflection of the twin moons shimmered in her eyes. "Then maybe," she said quietly, "I am ready to choose differently." Neither of them noticed the small drone hovering in the distance, recording every word, sending it back to the council, far above the world. In the halls of power, members of the Galactic Council watched the footage in silence. One of them spoke coldly. "The princess was meant to learn obedience. Instead, she is falling in love with her punishment. This cannot be allowed." They began to plan something dark. But down on the planet, under the soft moonlight, the human and the alien princess sat side by side, unaware of what was coming. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt free. She smiled softly. "Ethan," she said, "thank you for showing me what it means to be alive." He looked at her with quiet warmth. "No, Princess. You're the one teaching me what it means to belong." And somewhere deep inside her heart, something changed forever. The morning came with a strange silence. The sky over the city of Vorin glowed pale blue, but the peace that filled the air felt heavy, uneasy. Princess Lyra stood on the balcony of her chamber, looking down at the streets where people moved like shadows. The calm before the storm had arrived, though she did not yet know what kind. She turned as the door opened behind her. Ethan entered, his uniform still dusty from work. "You're awake early," he said softly. Lyra nodded. "I couldn't sleep. Something feels wrong," he frowned. "Wrong how?" Before she could answer, the royal alarm bells began to ring across the city. The sound echoed through the air, sharp and dreadful. Ethan and Lyra ran to the window and saw soldiers gathering in the square, ships flying low over the palace. The emblem on their sides was unmistakable, the Galactic Council's fleet. Lyra's heart sank. "They're here." Ethan turned to her. "For what?" She met his eyes, her voice shaking. "For us." Moments later, the doors to the chamber burst open and Lord Tareth entered, his face cold and proud. "Princess Lyra," he said, bowing slightly, "the council demands your presence. You are to stand trial for treason." "Treason?" Ethan said, stepping forward. "What are you talking about?" Tareth sneered. "The princess was sent here to humble herself, not to grow fond of her punishment. The council has seen enough. They believe she has broken their command." Lyra's hands trembled. "And what about him?" she asked. Tareth's eyes flashed with cruelty. "The human will be taken as well. His influence has corrupted royal blood. The council will decide his fate." Guards entered, their weapons raised. Ethan moved to stand in front of Lyra, his voice steady. "If you're taking her, you'll have to go through me." Tareth smiled. "That can be arranged." But before the guards could act, Lyra lifted her hand. "Stop," she commanded. The power of her royal voice made them hesitate. She looked at Ethan with fear and pain in her eyes. "Please don't fight." "Not yet." Ethan hesitated, then nodded slowly. He trusted her. They were taken aboard the council's ship, a massive silver craft that shone like a blade in the sky. Inside its grand hall, the council waited, 12 members in long robes, their faces hidden behind glowing masks. "Princess Lyra of House Vorin," said the head counselor, his voice deep and echoing. "You were sentenced to marry a human as a lesson in humility, but instead you have broken your oath and disgraced your kind. Do you deny this?" Lyra stood tall, though her heart pounded. "I do not deny what I feel," she said firmly. "I learned more from this human than from all your laws. If compassion and truth are crimes, then I am guilty." The hall filled with angry whispers. The head counselor's voice grew harsher. "And you, human, what have you to say for yourself?" Ethan met their gaze calmly. "I never wanted this. I was forced into it, same as her. But I won't apologize for treating her like a person instead of a symbol." "Silence," the head counselor thundered. "You will both be punished for this insolence. The princess will lose her royal title and the human—" "Enough!" Lyra's voice cut through the hall like a blade. "You call yourselves rulers of peace, but all you bring is fear. You think punishment brings honor, but all it brings is hate." The room grew still. She stepped forward. "When you forced me to marry him, I thought it was a curse. But it became a gift. I saw how humans live, how they survive, how they care, how they forgive. Maybe you fear them because they remind you what you have forgotten." The council members looked uneasy, but the head counselor only said, "Your words mean nothing. Guards, take them away." As the guards moved, Ethan suddenly grabbed Lyra's hand. "We're not done yet," he whispered. Then without warning, the lights flickered. The ship trembled. A loud alarm blared. Outside the windows, hundreds of small ships appeared. Voran citizens, rebels, and workers flying in defense of their princess. They had seen the arrest and risen up. "Protect the princess," a voice shouted through the comms. Chaos broke out in the hall. The guards rushed to their posts and the council panicked. Lyra turned to Ethan. "How did they know?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe kindness spreads faster than orders." He pulled her toward an exit. "Come on, we can get to the lower hangar." They ran through glowing corridors as the ship shook from outside attacks. Explosions echoed in the distance. Lyra's heart raced, but she felt alive. Together they reached a small docking bay. A transport craft waited there, unlocked. "Get in," Ethan said, powering up the controls. Lyra hesitated. "Ethan, if we escape, the council will call us traitors forever." He looked at her. "Then let them. We'll build something better somewhere else." The doors burst open behind them. Lord Tareth stood there, weapon drawn. "You can't run from this," he shouted. "You'll destroy everything your family built." Lyra faced him calmly. "My family built walls of pride and fear. Maybe it's time to build something new." Tareth fired, but Ethan moved first, pushing her aside. The shot hit the control panel instead, filling the room with sparks. Ethan tackled Tareth, and the two struggled until Lyra grabbed a metal rod and struck the floor, sending an energy pulse that threw Tareth back. Ethan pulled her into the ship, and they launched, just as another explosion tore through the hangar. The craft sped out into the sky, chased by council drones. Lyra took control of the weapons and fired back. Her hands moved with precision, her eyes sharp. "You taught me well," she said breathlessly. Ethan grinned. "You learn fast, Princess." The chase went on through the clouds until finally the rebels' ships appeared, surrounding them. Together they forced the council fleet to retreat. When the battle ended, cheers filled the comms. The people of Voran had chosen their side, not the council's but their princesses. Lyra looked out at the stars. For the first time, she felt no chains around her. No titles, no orders, just freedom. She turned to Ethan. "We're free now. But what happens next?" He smiled softly. "We start again, not as punishment. As partners." She looked at him for a long moment. The words felt right. She reached for his hand and nodded. "Then let's begin." The ship glided away from the world, leaving behind the ruins of old rules and the birth of something new. The council's power was broken, and a new story began. One where understanding could exist between worlds. Weeks later, on a quiet green moon, Lyra and Ethan built a new settlement. Humans and aliens worked side by side, laughing, building, planting, and dreaming. The stars above shone brighter than ever. One evening as the sun set, Lyra stood by the river where the light danced on the water. Ethan joined her. "Do you ever think about the past?" she asked softly. "Sometimes," he said, "but I like this better." She smiled. "I used to think I was being punished. Now I know I was being given a second chance." He took her hand, and together they watched the stars appear. The galaxy was wide, full of dangers and wonders. But for the first time, neither of them felt alone. Far away, in the broken halls of the old council, whispers spread. People spoke of a princess and a human who had defied fate and built peace. Their story traveled from world to world, carried by hope, and somewhere deep in the night sky, their ship's light still moved among the stars. Two souls from different worlds who had found something greater than power or pride. They had found peace, and in that peace they found each other's purpose.